everybody, and welcome to another episode of Technically Human. Technically Human is an ongoing series that talks about the most human elements of managing technical people. This week, we have another great episode with Eric Gong, who is the founder and CEO of Eric Gong Company, a recruiting service that helps tech companies find the best talent. This week, we talk about something really near and dear to both of our hearts, which is recruiting and interviewing. Specifically, we dive deep into how to unlock candidate motivation and really to understand the why behind their decisions and their experience. We talk about how to do that within the first 15 minutes of an interview, the right questions to be asking, and a bunch of other tips and tricks that Eric has uncovered over thousands of candidate interviews. So we hope you sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. We'd love to hear from y'all, so please hit us up on our socials or email us at hello@stat.co. We'd love any feedback or ideas for future episodes or people you'd like for us to interview. So thank you y'all and enjoy. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Technically Human. We are so happy to be here again. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I know on both coasts, it seemed like the weather was really nice. It was amazing for my side over here in Portland, and Eric just told me it was awesome in New York as well. So we hope you guys enjoyed that as well. We have some pretty interesting topics today. We want to talk about recruiting. I know this is a big word in most engineering managers and leaders' lives and heads, and probably the one thing that takes up most of your headspace and time, especially if you're, at early stage or growing companies. So we want to hear from Eric around his experience in recruiting. We want to get into, kind of the nitty gritty, like things around interview questions or, what really in your experience has made candidates stand out. Or, what are you really looking for other than technical expertise, obviously? What are those standout qualities or responses or anything like that? So, yeah, let's dive right in, Eric. Would love to kind of hear your perspective on recruiting.
Yeah, obviously, this is my favorite topic because I had a team, built up a pretty big team at a startup, and now I work with startups to help them hire engineers. So I think it's really broad, right? So I'd be curious, what are the main questions that you're hearing out there, or which area of recruiting you want me to dive into first?
Yeah, I think we can dive into, let's talk about interview questions and maybe not just questions, but the whole process and kind of moments that are really important for you to understand whether a candidate really is qualified, not just for the role, but also about culture. I would love to hear how you sort for culture fit and how you think about helping managers do that in their teams.
All right, great one. So we're talking from the perspective of the hiring team, hiring manager, right?
Yes.
So I think it's super important, and I think so we're coming from the perspective of startups, by the way. I think most hiring managers just don't put in the work. I'm just really sorry to say, but like, what do you really want out of someone in this role? Like, have you written it down at all? So I'm guilty in the beginning. It's like, oh, let's just hire some people. Let's just, right, like interview some people. We need some Rails and React engineers. And over time, you kind of realize like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's more to it.
Right.
I think it's really key to get it written on paper, like you as a hiring manager, like what do you really want in terms of like culture fit, right? Technical ability, teamwork ability, things of that nature, right? And just put it all on paper, right? First. And then get the hiring team, like the people on the team in a room and start talking about it and start getting perspectives.
No, I was going to ask, how do you, especially because we're coming from the standpoint of a startup or, early growth stage companies, maybe they don't have that kind of culture, language, or those things, written down on paper. How do they go about doing that, especially when they want to, have a little bit more of a formal structure around this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about putting in the work. And I'd say even ideally, the values and the culture actually start from the leadership of the organization. I had been part of organizations that didn't put it down on paper and kind of never had thought about it or never wrote it out or never discussed it. And it's
Mm.
kind of up to the team to kind of figure it out. And those generally don't yield very good results. So I'd
Right.
say ideally at the organizational level, they have that in terms of like what are their values and what is the culture. And I say within engineering, you kind of have that too. So I think there's a subculture usually within engineering. And I'd say at some companies, engineering blends into the rest of the organization, and at
Mm.
other companies, engineering is kind of like the special snowflake of a team off in a corner doing whatever they want. But I think it's super important to at least acknowledge what that's like, right? Because it is going to have an effect on who you're looking for. So, for
Sure.
example, if the software development lifecycle in your company is engineers that are like sitting in a corner and handing out specs, like the kind of engineer that you're probably going to want to find is someone who will adapt well in that culture, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And if you don't look for that and you don't communicate that, they're gonna be very surprised when they come in. On the
Mm.
opposite end, if you have a product engineering heavy culture where you work a lot with the product team, design team, the business teams, analytics, you're gonna have to say like, hey, this is the kind of person that we're looking for, right? Someone that
Mm-hmm.
could work really well with others. So at
Sure.
least formalizing, understanding what is the culture of your company, and then formalizing is so
Yeah.
important.
That's great. Do you have like questions that you ask as it relates to culture that you really have found to produce some good answers or thoughtful
Yeah.
answers?
Yeah. So this is my favorite question. If I gave you a magic wand, describe for me your ideal next role. I usually find that it works really well because the way that I look at hiring people, I'd say people fit, quote unquote, culture fit, and that might be a question for another time, is the most important part. Like,
Hmm.
how would they work within your team? How would they
Right.
fit in? Will there be friction when this person comes in, or will they fit in seamlessly? Will they raise up the level of the team as a human being here? So I think that's what I have looked for in the past. That's even more important than technical skills. So I'll definitely be happy to find a really good people fit and less of a technical fit because we feel like we could train the technical, but training the people side of it is a little bit harder. So I like the
Sure.
magic wand question because it shows motivations,
Mm.
right?
Can you give an
And
example of how? Like, how did somebody answer that showed those motivations?
yeah, so if I had a magic wand in my next role, I will be interacting with the product team a lot more because I want to influence product decisions. I ran a product engineering team, so I like that answer,
Right.
right? Another one could be in my ideal, if I had a magic wand in my next role, I'd be growing engineers' careers,
Hmm.
right? Where in my previous company, I had that opportunity, but the management structure was too heavy at the layer
Right.
that it
Right.
was, right? So it kind of like shows me what is motivating them to get out of their previous role and into this role and kind of like what they want to do, right?
Sure.
And if where they want to go and what they want to do kind of align with what you have, they're gonna be like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a good chance they'll be successful,
Right.
right? But if they say like, hey, if I had a magic wand, I'd sit in the corner and write code and not have to interact with people at all. And I'm running a product engineering team that communication is really important. I mean, it's telling me something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the key to that question is understanding where someone's head is at,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
that's what you don't know in an interview,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like too
That's
many
true.
times in an interview, it's just like check boxing stuff. And it's just like, I'm trying to figure out where their head is at, right? So that I can understand what are their motivations.
Sure.
And that's,
And
that's
are
really
there
key.
any
Yeah.
other questions that you ask that get to that? Because I mean, I think that is probably the toughest part because you can definitely, I mean, obviously code tests and those type of things in interviews are helpful for technical stuff, but it's really hard to gauge a person and their fit. Like you said, two things that stood out to me. One was, will this person add or reduce friction on the team? And will this person elevate the team by joining? How do you kind of unearth that in an interview?
Yeah. I mean, you just said the answer, right? So you start with the surface level question, and then you just peel back the layers of the onion, right? So you understand like a person's ability to work with others kind of based on how they've decided to work with others. So you can decide like, hey, they're actually like not proactive in building relationships, or you can also decide like, hey, they're just like they try, but they're in like a pretty crappy environment. So
Hmm.
for example, so starting with the magic wand question, right? So let's say they come up with something like, in my ideal next role, I would want to interact with the product with the other teams a bit more,
Mm-hmm.
right? So okay, so that's the first layer. So if we're peeling back the layers of the onion, now then I'll dig into that, right? And I'll say, okay, that's great. Tell me about like how you interacted with the team at your current company. Then
Mm.
you're getting really tactical about like what they've done. So they might say
Sure.
like, hey, we have a product engineering team, but like we do work well or we don't work well. And then let's say they say, hey, we have a product engineering team at my current company, and we interact with product and design and whatnot. And I'll say, okay, so what are the challenges that you're facing at your current team that you
Mm-hmm.
hope won't be challenges in your future company?
Right.
So they might give me one answer or the other. They might say, "Hey, we have this, there's this product manager, and they're not, they're not the best product manager, and they cause a lot of friction." I'll say, "Oh, like that's something I want to dig into, right?"
Mm.
So I try to figure out like what's it really like and what are the challenges and how to
Mm-hmm.
handle it. So I say, "Oh, tell me about that. Like, give me a scenario where they were like really difficult to work with." And they might like give me a scenario, and then based on that scenario, I'll understand how they handle conflict resolution,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
are they the kind of person that says like, "Ugh, like I don't like this person, I'm out"? Do they handle situations like that? I think maybe for earlier stage engineers, like that might be okay as they get more mature in their experience. Like maybe that's less okay. For a manager, these are questions. Let's say I'm hiring engineering managers or directors. I want to
Mm-hmm.
understand conflict resolution.
Mm.
What shitty situations have they been put in that they've gotten out of, resolving those conflicts in a manner that the whole place doesn't burn down, right?
Sure.
So like the going back to your question is like, okay, however they answer, I'll find a way to dig in to understand how they handle situations. And you do that both kind of like at a people level, which I like to do, and then you could do at a code level as well.
Mm. Are there any other kind of questions that you ask, or maybe answers that signal red flags for you? What would be those red flags be in terms of this person may or may not be a good fit on these levels?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is like talking shit
Mm.
about your previous team, like just blatant trash talking. So, I mean, I could understand like toxic situations, but I say like it's funny. It seems really obvious, but
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. There are people that would just be like, my previous boss was a shithead.
I mean, I think everyone's heard that. Why is it such a red flag? Because, or I guess what I'm asking is, what happens if you do hire somebody that was really good technically, that was kind of well rounded, all except that one piece? What would happen to that team that this person
Yeah.
entered?
Yeah, you'll fuck up the culture. And number one rule, don't fuck up the culture in engineering. And I'm saying it with a bit of passion, but like I gotta be honest, like there's been so many times in my career where
Mm.
like early in my career, like, oh, got hired that rock star. Where when rock stars and ninjas was an appropriate term, it was like, yeah, we got hired this rock star and they'll solve all our technical problems. I think the more I learned about management is like software is a people problem. And like, I don't think we're building like rocket ships or anything. Like granted, my background is in web applications. So we're not building the most, like genius algorithms isn't going to
Mm-hmm.
solve our problem. It's like, collective teamwork to deliver a robust and delightful product to market.
Mm.
So I'd say like every time we hired that brilliant jerk, it's come back to like bite us in the ass. So I say that rule, rule number one for us was like, if that person is a jerk, don't hire him. There's been lots of examples where we lived up to that. And, it could be a time where someone comes in and it's just like, not nice to the administrative assistant, and like
Mm.
it's just like, well, we're not going to hire that person because
Mm-hmm.
that person came in and like came off as a jerk. Or and that's why it's like some people feel like it's okay. I think especially in engineering, some engineers feel like it's okay to be arrogant. Like, hey,
Interesting.
like I'm a special engineer, I have 4 other job offers, and you need to like kiss my ass and give me the best one. And maybe for some companies that's great, but for like the way that I think, nah.
Yeah, that's probably a really hard place that managers find themselves in often, especially in early stage companies where they don't feel like they have quite the selection, or they don't have a broad range of candidates because they are early stage, and it's a, obviously more of a risk for people to join, or whatever, so they might go ahead with a brilliant jerk just because they don't have as many candidates to pick from. What kind of advice would you give to somebody in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say for maybe for like inexperienced managers, they like kind of like try to take what they can get. I'd
Right.
say I mean, I say like if you're I mean, I guess if you're a desperate startup, I mean, I guess I could see a world where like you have to like go with that. I
Mm,
mean, if you have some capitalization at your startup, and you can pay engineers, it's like uh, they're gonna mess you up bad, right? Like if you hire a brilliant jerk and they go and sit in the corner and like just write code, like no one else is gonna know what the code does,
right.
right? If it's a product engineering team, you're building products, right? And you need to know the end user. It's not about like getting shipped designs and product specs and going building the thing and coming back. So that culture piece is really important. You need to know what it is, right? You need
Mm,
to know what your culture is. You need to know how you what you expect out of your team members. And if you could get it as early into interview process as possible, even written down on the job description, I think that's really, really helpful. I think actually that's a key thing that I've done recently that helps out a lot. Like just
mm.
writing down what are you looking for? Why? What the expectations of the role are? Putting it as early as possible.
Got it. No, I think that's great. When I hear somebody say, talk about your culture, start with your culture, and hire for your culture, I think it's easy to assume, like, or broaden what culture is. Like, we're collaborative, or we're helpful to each other, we put the team first, or kindness first, don't be an asshole. I feel like a lot of these things are repeated but not necessarily unique to a particular team. Do you have any ways that you can help teams like actually dial in on what makes their particular team culture unique? Like, because I think everybody can say, like, quote unquote culture buzzwords, but it doesn't really help candidates truly understand the culture of the team.
Yeah. So let's like take out the word, like if you can use the word culture, which is probably a good one, like what do you do? So like I think what's even better is like what is it like to work there? Right? Like so like why don't we just use that? Like what is it like to work here at your company? Like what and why do
Right.
you work there? Use that, right? Like why do I work? Why do I work here? I work
Mm,
here because really smart people, really kind people that really help each other out, right? Like that's a great reason.
right.
I mean,
Right.
that's a great substitute for the word culture, right? So if you can't really define what your culture is, like use that word. Why do you work there?
Yeah.
And like the common thing on my team is like, why do you work on this team? Everyone always says the same answer: the
Hmm.
people, the people, the people. I actually used to use that as a value prop when I used to like just go and ask the engineering team, like, hey, why you working? It's like always the people. And they always say, like, hey, we actually say that in interviews. I was like, oh, really? Oh, that's a great one.
Mm,
And then that I just, as a VP or as a manager, I say, like, hey, like the number one reason people work here is the people.
yeah.
And I'd like to think for engineers, it's like that's very close to the top.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, I would love to hear just maybe one more question you like to ask around the people part. Like, is there anything, other than how have you worked with, previous teams, or the magic wand question? How do you
Yeah.
really tell the sort of person, of a candidate is? I think that's just such a hard thing to do in an hour, or,
Yeah.
meeting somebody 4 times or whatever. How do you
Yeah.
really figure out who this
Yeah.
person is?
I mean, that's a deep question. I'd say like I get a sense. So my interview process usually is, let's say I have a recruiter sends over to me. I'm the hiring manager. I need to find that out in the first 15 minutes.
Mm,
I usually do. So I'm well practiced because I've interviewed a lot of people, right? So I say the magic wand question is really important. And then you'll kind of like peel back the layers.
Mm-hmm.
Finding out someone's motivation is key.
Mm.
Finding out someone's motivation is key. Finding out someone's motivation is key, right? So the magic wand, I think, is a really good question. And then another question, and like these are not kind of like maybe not original to me. I can't remember at this point. Let's assume I just stole these from the internet. The
Sure.
other one that I like is really good. So let's say you join your next ideal company, right? By the time you're done at that company, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, what do you hope to have accomplished? And I really like that question because it helps me understand their motivation.
Right.
The first one or two things that come out of their mouth, like it shows motivation. Hey, I would really like to deliver a very large product to market. And then maybe I'll dig into that, right? Like, did they
Right.
never deliver large products to the market? I would like to build a team or multiple
Mm.
teams underneath me of
Right.
engineering managers,
Right.
right? Like, so in my mind, like, have they, like, what have they done on that end? Like, why do they struggle on that end,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or what were they really good at on that end?
Mm.
Right? Or they say like, hey, I want to be at a startup that IPO'd.
Mm.
That's something. Or I want to double my income, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Right.
another thing, right? Every single person's different. I've got so many different answers. That's
Right.
actually why I like interviewing people, as crazy as that sounds. It shows people's motivation. So yeah, I like those questions. I like the magic wand question. And I like the by the time you're done question.
No, I love it. I think these are really helpful. And I think, your point about getting to the motivation quickly, I think that's probably going to unlock a lot of value for managers that are listening now, because it's really easy to start with other kinds of questions, right? It's easy to start, with maybe more low hanging fruit, like what's your experience? What are you looking for? And getting into kind of these nitty gritty things within, like you said, within the first 15 minutes, I think is probably going to be huge. So
Yeah. You
yeah,
got to know what you want. Like
that's
tell
true
tell me about yourself. Oh
on
my
both
gosh.
sides. Yeah, on
I
both
think
sides.
so, right? Like tell me about yourself that could lead to some stuff. But I think you got to know what you want and be able to draw it out of someone.
Totally.
And that's what makes you a good leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh
No, this has been great. I think we can do actually a few more episodes on this. I think this is a really meaty, juicy topic. So
yeah.
thank you again, Eric. Please check out Eric Gong Company and everything Eric's doing. He actually produces a lot of content with other folks too, so I'll link out to some of those things.
Awesome.
Please check out Stat. We're still bringing on beta users, so check us out as well. Stay tuned. We have weekly episodes, so we'll always have content available. Thank you all. Take care.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks all.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.